I wasn't going to start here. I was not going to start here. And then you poked the bear. GA, you took it one step too far. You got to roll in with the first comment of the morning. It's a holiday, man. It's a holiday. People trying to celebrate. We're all supposed to be enjoying life here. And you come in here, John, no one cares about your teams. Well, guess what, man? It was pretty unfortunate this weekend. Pretty unfortunate for old John Boy. Every single game popped off under the sun. I think I had 7 at one point, 7 of the top 20 teams were John Boy with Purdy stuff, and was just hoping those Purdy doubles were going to hold. And then every game went nuke. So unfortunate. So there you go. There's my spiel about my teams, but nobody cares about my team. Everybody cares about Numi's team. That purple laundry, my friend. How we feeling today?
You know how I'm feeling. I'm not even entertaining this. I'm not entertaining any of it.
Let's put our analyst hat on for a second. Did they deserve to win that ball game?
I don't fucking know. I don't care. Our defense sucks. I'll just start out by saying anyone that wants to fucking come at Kirk can't defend that. Don't know what he's doing. But anyone that wants to come at him and say the game he didn't do well, the defense sold just like they did the entire season. So
yeah,
Kirk didn't do one thing wrong until the last play of the game when it all came on Kirk's shoulders, and he did you do the check down on 3rd down and you throw that 3rd down play on fucking 4th down. Anyway, yeah, I'm done. And the last thing I want to say, Ed Donatel should have been fired halfway through the season to come into the fucking season and try and fit a square peg in a round hole and change us to a 3-4 when we've never played a 3-4 in 20 years and our defenders literally fit a 3-4. Get the fuck out of here with that.
That's a fair point
with that, Ed. Get him off. Ship him to fucking Thailand for the cliff, dude. Anyway, done. Like, it's just, I can't. We're gonna go back into purgatory. We have to deal with the whole off season. It's just, at least we fucking got Correa, and he didn't get to sign with the 2 other people that wanted him first.
That's a good pivot. Because baseball's here. Chris, what's up, man? Touching tribute for you to be wearing the purple today for Numi's sake.
I know. I didn't really click in until I sat down and turned the camera on, and I was like, oh, shit, I hope this isn't going to turn into an awkward conversation. But glad that we got that out of the way up top. And, yeah, Ed Donatel needs to pick a new line of work because defensive coordinator ain't it.
Yeah, I mean, that game should have been over on the series before if Slayton just holds on to that ball.
Yeah,
I mean, he had 30 100%. Yards of separation.
I'm just like, literally, leave it to them showing a clip of Slayton dropping the ball and the Vikings fans. That's the only thing we can get excited for on defense. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know we're going into San Francisco and getting our asses handed to us. Mm-hmm. Just beat the team you're supposed to beat.
That's fair.
Anyway,
yeah, that's fair.
Man,
all right, we'll bury that one. We'll let Numi. I love the passion coming through. We'll let Numi sit on that one a bit. I'm sure he's gonna have some more dialed takes, some real stuff. Look at this sicko already. 2 more for the bullpen. I love it, Paul. Yeah. So today we're gonna do Monday Night Football for a hot minute here, just to hit it off the top. Then we'll talk about the hoop slate a little bit. Man, there's a large discrepancy between entries and fill rate right now. Start jumping in there. I know it's a holiday and stuff, but if you're sick enough to be watching this show, you're sick enough to be playing the site all day today too. So yeah, I mean, we could touch on that one real quick, but let's do Monday Night Football real fast off the top here. I think with these single game slates, there's always, we've voiced our opinion about how we don't love them, but it's nice that they do them and that sort of thing. One thing I will point out about the PPR style amendment for this is that the market hasn't really caught up, because all week long until Sunday morning, Chris Godwin was above Mike Evans. Projection models came out. Mike Evans was ahead in half PPR scoring. And now all of a sudden we have a full PPR contest, and Chris Godwin is behind Mike Evans. So I just want to point that out as one potential place to get exploitable on this slate. But I think you can kind of do anything you want to mix and match in the first 7-8 picks here. I put out a 2-quarterback team this morning. 2-quarterback teams on single game slates are so hard to find usually. I've seen a couple already in these because of the fact that, man, you can mix and match so many fun pieces from this game at the top and just feel good about your lineups. So I think the two overarching things that I'm doing today is I'm flipping the build so that my ownership when it runs in line with ADP looks different than other people. So I've been taking Godwin, Brady, or Evans at the 101 to flip to the other side of the board so that my Godwin, because nobody in their right mind is going to be surprised if any one of these players ends up as the top scorer tonight. Nobody in their right mind is going to be surprised if any of these 8 names end up as the top scorer tonight. So I think it's a beautiful slate to just go ahead and stop falling in line with ADP and stop falling in line with the exact same patterns as everybody else has and just flip the board. And I think a good way to do that for my money is Chris Godwin, because what does Dallas do very well? Well, they rush the passer. What does statue of Brady do very poorly? Run away from pressure. So what happens? The ball comes out really fast. Who's wide open? Check downs to Lenny and Chris Godwin. I'm taking a big stance on Leonard Fournette tonight as well. I already did in the BR contest, just as like, hey, it's going back to playoff Lenny, 70-30. Let's roll here. Chris, anything to add macro level to this game at all tonight?
I'm with you. I really like Tampa, truthfully, in this spot. This just feels like one of those classic Dallas comes in and starts running Zeke and Pollard into a brick wall. Like, it's just a really bad stylistic matchup. What Dallas wants to do is, establish that run, kind of get things going. And that's the one kind of strong point of Tampa's team consistently. And I think that Tampa has shown a willingness in games where they're up against the wall to just kind of unleash Brady and let him go to work. Mm-hmm. And this Dallas secondary is horrible. They are down to, like, I don't know what, third or fourth string corners on some of the outsides. Mm-hmm. And I could totally see them just letting Brady go to work and picking these guys apart.
Yeah, I could. It's very strange to see projection models give a player like 40 plus attempts, right? Like, projection models are normally like these mean outcomes, and you see like, hey, maybe on the high end, 42 attempts, something like that. Like, Brady's projections are coming in at like 47, 48. Like, I'm just buying volume there. If they're trailing, great. Let them just throw it, right? I've really been harping on the Tampa pass catching side. 4 of my 5 highest owned players in the BR contest that's still running are from this Tampa pass catching side. Numi, anything to add with the game environment? Random players, back end one-offs, anything?
No, I will just add to your point that I like you're telling yourself a story in your lineups. You're literally getting different than the field, and that's the point to do in these showdown contests. We know that we can't just port them over specifically from DFS. It's not a 1-for-1, shout out cheap, but you can still bring in principles, and just doing that to make your builds instantly different from other people, so you're not just duped. Anything can happen in a one game, especially in a playoff. So yeah, I like what you're doing there. Just telling yourself a story, getting different with your lineups, easier first or path to first. If I was playing this slate, I'd be doing the exact same thing. So I like it.
Cool. Yeah, feel similarly there. There's a bunch of fun names to click on at the back end. I think Tampa is going to really condense their wide receiver stuff, and Russell Gage and Julio will almost end up splitting. I had some of their snap count stuff pulled up. They haven't played together in a hot minute, but they've basically been flipping back and forth over the course of the year and just splitting that wide receiver 3 role. I got box scores open. Yeah. So like Gage has kind of had this like flip in recent memory. Julio wasn't active for the most recent game, but in weeks prior, like 12 through 15, it was Julio working over Gage. Then we kind of saw a little bit of a flip. So I think there's a spot where you could kind of take a stand there. I don't definitively have a take there necessarily. I'm mixing and matching, but I think it's a spot where you could take a stand and could get a little bit of leverage there. Another spot you can really take a stand, in my opinion, is Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup's ADP being down behind Rachaad White, who I think is going to play 30 to 35% of snaps at most, and Russell Gage, who's splitting the WR3 role. I mean, Michael Gallup's going to be out there for 85% of plays, and his ADP is thrust behind these type of players. Michael Gallup is an absolute third round smash for me.
Can you go back to the Tampa Bay snap counts, or just real quick? Then look at the tight end position.
Oh yeah, that I hadn't get there yet. That he's my favorite fourth round pick right now.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that seems like just a fun little tack on that. Like, you know what I mean? This, you can scroll up a little bit if you can. The overlay just taking the week 17. There you go, perfect.
Yeah, so what Numi's referring to here is in recent memory, we've kind of seen a flippening of Cade Otton, good UW boy, taking over Cameron Brate as the primary pass catching. I would not read into week 18 information from Tampa at all, because they did have like this semi-rest week where they rested the starters basically after the first drive, and Mike Evans didn't play at all. So I would not read into what you saw last week with the Brate versus Otton. You could read into it in terms of like, oh yeah, they clearly view Brate as a backup there, right? So just something for my money is I'm really betting on Cade Otton as a back end pass catcher in the fourth round right now, taking my Michael Gallup exposure in the third round. And then my first two rounds are some combination of Brady and Godwin, Brady and Evans, if I can get it, Brady and Lenny, something like that. Either guys, anything else to add, or should we just do one draft here and say we did it?
Let's do it.
Get it.
Yeah. Did I explain why Nez isn't here yet?
Pitbull.
Yeah. No, I just can't remember if I said anything or not. Yeah, elephant in the room. Chris is obviously not Nez. Nez won't be with us the next 3 days because he's out living that Instagram supermodel lifestyle. He's out and about in the LA streets for the next 3 days. So living that life. Yeah, LED bringing up a couple good ones in the chat here. Telling your narrative of like betting quarterback to fail and playing this through the run game, like always a viable strategy. Love that. Has some leverage there. And then saying the same thing that Gallup's been fantastic leverage all weekend in every contest. Yeah, I agree, because everybody's just chasing box scores and looking at the box scores, right? So, yeah. Yeah. That's a sick from all the nugs. Emergency surgery in LA. Get the nugs
out. Man must have like an iron stomach, because that was that was a marathon.
It was.
It was more like a sprint if you think about it. The dude just
he
just pushed through that. Like all of a sudden he was just like, yeah, and I'm done. This is the stream, folks. I gotta go lay down.
Yeah. CD falling to 4. I mean, this is what I mean about getting like the two quarterbacks together and stuff like that, is like it can just happen when one guy flips the board with Mike Evans up front, right? And then the two quarterbacks go, you can do like all sorts of weird things. So I'm just going to go ahead and take Lamb and Pollard here and bet that the scores run through Dallas in that regard. Just because I think it's a rare combination. We effectively flipped the board, but we flipped the board to the other end because somebody else flipped it for us with the Mike Evans pick. So yeah, it's interesting to just get like, you can keep falling into these unique combinations in the first two rounds, which I cannot normally say about these single game contests, because there are so many people, there are so many players viable
Yeah.
in the first couple rounds, right?
It's a lot better than a Texans Titans slate. You know what I mean? Like those slates where you just get absolutely you get Derrick Henry. There
Right.
you go. That's your 101. And then it's just like all after literally that, it's crap. I mean, I can
Yeah,
pick off
exactly.
any teams, but yeah, getting good good quarterbacks, good skill positions, good running backs on each team, two technically depth running, like each team has two running backs. So that's another interesting strategy to play too.
I think because we got unique at the front end, we could just eat the chalk here and go like Rachaad White and Russell Gage. Do you guys have a lean somewhere else?
Not really.
Maybe White and Otten. I don't know, but
yeah, we could do that.
Otten would be the one name that I think.
Yeah, you just kind of named off the whole split thing where I think Otten would be on the field more, but I think someone did put up, and I don't know the stats. I think Breck maybe said like Gage has the most red zone targets. Now I don't know if that's with people in and people out, and he's just, I don't know how that all works, but yeah.
Yeah, let's go ahead and just take him there and lock that up. But like one thing I'll just say in general about this slate is just like it's really fun to draft because of all the combinations you can find your way to, right? I mean, like we just found our way to a pretty unique build, but we just went around ADP in that draft, but our opponents did not. So it creates unique dynamics for everyone. So yeah, it's very interesting. I like T.Y. Hilton as that one-off pick late there. He's going to play less snaps than Noah Brown, but like T.Y. as just kind of like, could break the slate with
that
one
John
deep
Brown
target.
Yeah, that John Brown toss, one catch, 57 yards, tutty.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, GA saying that Julio's good for one touchdown. The Julio narrative is really interesting to me because we could go ahead and see like, hey, we've just been saving Julio for like this situation. Right. And now it's all of a sudden you see what we saw from Julio in week 1 of this year, where it's like, oh my God, he has his first rushing attempt in 4 years and they're using him in all these creative ways, right? Like unheard of. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Here you go. LED just being like, can't believe he just got a Brady, Godwin, Zeke, Otten. Like that's a phenomenal team in this contest, right? Like, but it's viable because the way that these rounds fall, all these combinations are viable. That's why I would say don't be scared off of the 2 QB today, because you're going to get yours if you put a little bit of volume into this contest. Like, I don't think it's that rare.
Yeah.
Anything else, gents?
I like that. I like it.
All right.
Tampa money
30 minutes till the money line. What?
Tampa money line.
Tampa money line. I like it.
I'll have to. Well, you're in Canada. I can't do that. Well, I'll have to drive down to Iowa, I suppose.
Oh yeah, we can bet the shit out of the money line here, dude.
Yeah. Well, can't do that here in good old Minnesota.
They took away my drafts and gave me my sports book. So
yeah.
Honestly, exactly I think you'd rather have it the other way with how into Underdog you are.
Probably just the worst possible timing.
Yeah. There's RT. Makes sense. Mr. Surbag. Yep.
And yeah. All the sickos jamming before lock here.
I'll give the context of the slate. It's very interesting, very split up. We got one game starting at the first game starts at 12:10. Next game at 1:40. Then there's a bunch between 2:10 and 2:40 or 3:10. And then it's again staggered to 5:10 all the way to 9:40.
Okay.
Yeah. So first game is at 12:10 Central Time. And then 9:40 Central Time.
Okay. So what does that mean for us for the slate in terms of news? Are there any late?
It's going to mean that we're not going to. Yeah, you're not going to get like the people on these Q tags. We're not going to get a very just crisp and clear injury report right now. We would get the injury report. You know what I mean? If all the games started now, most of the games starting at 2:10. Like we're still not even going to get those injury reports before the slate locks.
Right.
So you're just basically you're just drafting the guys with the Qs if you want them. A lot of them are lower in ADP versus their ceiling projection. So I've been doing just that.
Mm-hmm.
And then other than that, yeah, it's just MLK Day. It's really interesting. You gotta play narratives. because like
Who are
LeBron's
some
on
of your?
sorry, well, so LeBron's on a back-to-back. I'll just name these off like LeBron, Lakers, Warriors, Rockets, Knicks, back-to-back. Front end, Bucks, Raptors. a lot of
wow.
good teams there with a lot of uncertainty. I would do Steph or LaMelo. Yep. I think it's Steph. Steph is going to be popping a little bit heavier. It's really close, so it's not like it's like if you're just taking the guy on the rank sheet, yeah, you're going to get that, but it's very close.
I
But yeah,
think
it's a sorry, go
I
ahead.
think Melo just feels like a dude who Melo just feels like a dude who could just be like fouled out in in the first queue, like playing against the Jays. You know
No,
what I
100
mean?
yeah, 100%. I mean, they did just play Boston, so it's an interesting like it's a back-to-back against Boston, although they've had a day break. So you know what I mean, or a 2-day break, but they're playing like same Boston. Ja.
Yeah, so I guess this is just a spot where like we just draw a line in the sand between like the discrepancy in talent between what Ja can do for a slate versus the other ones. Although Jalen Brunson's been crushing recently. Donovan Mitchell had a
no
70
Brunson
burger.
in terms of ADP ceiling. Brunson's thrusted way up there.
Yeah.
And he is lower. The one guy that I'm not going to say, I hope we can get into third. He has a Q tag, plays a very, very nice matchup.
Yeah, I tend to agree with this LED where Steph.
Yeah, no Clay
Steph
too.
Steph versus Washington with no Clay seems like an absolute smash. Like that's where my eyes went right away as well. And I haven't drafted any of these yet. I actually
I think
I had no idea it was MLK Day slate.
Yeah, Iggy's out. Not that Iggy matters, but
Yeah,
just another guy.
What is this? The playoffs?
What is this? 2015?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really interesting here. This just slate, like it really is. It's going to be something just wild. Oh well, we're not going to get our boy. Rip us.
Rip us, he says. Let's see.
I know.
Because you just know
taking him.
RT will take him.
RT's taking him 100%.
Okay. All right. Well, don't say him just in case, but
yeah, unless Surbag takes a different guy and then it's just in the ranks different. But
okay. Well, let's see. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about both these players, because I do think this third round is a pretty cool spot here.
Is your clock thing back at that 20-second thing?
It might have been.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's back giving us 20 seconds on the clock.
Oh, I might have to manually adjust the timer again. Yeah, it happens periodically.
Roger.
Yeah, if this actually a good actually there was two
here.
Let's see. Yeah, see how there's like this long pause and then
Edwards
he took goes.
All right, take Kristaps.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting that Ant is kind of like that wild card that's the third round guy you were thinking of.
Yeah,
I like Kristaps today.
Ant
seems
is
like a good spot.
Yeah, Ant is literally like borderline first round pick ceiling.
Okay.
Like in terms of both sites, Chad, another, Chad Lee, everyone knows him, but his prone projections, I sent him that. He goes, it's good to know that. Wait, what?
Just got a third
He's
round
got
job.
round. I don't get that, but whatever. Good on you. Good on you.
Q-tag.
Yeah, but
the peoples are scared of the Q tags.
Not even on a back-to-back. Like,
Numi, some people just don't look that hard into this stuff, man.
I know, but when we're drafting with just freaking like shields all over, you would think that you wouldn't get that.
Yeah, I mean, he probably just got in a room that wasn't. It's a holiday, man. People are boozing it up. I kind of hope DeJounte falls here to us just because, like, fourth round DeJounte sounds fun without Trey, right?
Trey's in.
Oh, well, there you go. I didn't know Trey was back.
Yeah, he's probable. But, I mean,
okay.
I expect him to play.
Yeah. Any names for you that are popping comparative to
DeJounte?
Yeah.
For me, yeah.
projection versus ADP targets kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have no Scotty Barnes, like absolutely no Scotty Barnes. Like he's near 50 in ceiling, but again, he can do it. But I just at that price, no, thank you. Lowry is popping pretty good for where he's normally going, Markkanen. Later guys is really interesting. Mr. Rudy Gobert is back in Utah. So revenge narrative. You got everyone talking about how it's a terrible trade, me included. You have Walker Kessler coming out there just balling, putting up stocks. Like they have all our picks. So I mean, if he plays, it's a fun revenge narrative. He could just probably, I mean, he would just dominate them. I would like to
didn't even know Walker Kessler was part of that.
Yeah, we drafted him and then traded him. So Tim Connor, yeah, we gave up anything and everything for just Rudy. So it was just anyway. But I mean, yeah, I'm touting the MN guys because they're popping. So anyone playing Utah is gonna pop. So if we're playing the Heat, you probably wouldn't hear me touting them. If you were playing the Knicks, you probably wouldn't hear me touting them.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, any other names, Numi, like back end stuff here?
Yep. So Gobert, Kevin Porter,
both Q tag guys.
Yep. Miles Turner,
yep.
Q tag guy. Some guys that are interesting that are going at that 30 range. Marcus Smart has a Jaylen Brownless Celtics going against the Hornets. So like,
yeah, we saw him put up like 40 the other night.
Yeah, I mean he's a real fun 6th round pick. I'm not gonna lie, he's interesting up there. That sometimes falls to those later picks.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I'm just trying to find anyone else that's like per se popping. It's really so the main guys popping up there are going to be Ant, Kristaps, Kevin Porter. Yeah, Kevin Porter, Rudy are in the top 22 for ceiling, both of them versus their ADP. So that'll tell you that.
Okay, what do you think? Do we take Garland or Jaren Jackson here, and then just grab one of those Q tag guys late there?
We can do Garland. I think Garland's fine. I like Garland here. Like that's a nice fall. He's up there in projection too. I like that a lot.
Jaren Jackson feels nice as like a hedge against Ja. I wouldn't do it in this lineup with Ja necessarily, but hedging against Ja playing and then eating some of that volume feels good, right?
Yeah.
Can you paint the same narrative with like 6th round Dylan Brooks or Jones or something? Gobert's first game back 50-50, he gets ejected. I fucking love that.
I don't even know if that's like, I would put like a 2% chance, like on a calling someone getting ejected. I don't think Gobert's one to. The thing that Chaos put out was the Naz Reid swaps to Gobert are just free. So you're
good point.
Yeah. So good shout out. I didn't put that out there.
Yeah, Naz Reid's good.
Yeah, and this too. This exactly too. So I mean, nice shout out, Chaos. Sorry. Fred VanVleet needs to be out for Barnes to play off that price tag.
Okay. Yeah. So what do you think with this last pick here? Do we take Miles Turner and just like hope we get the Q tag versus ceiling?
Yeah, I want to scroll up a little bit quick. Let's put him in there. What else do we got?
Yeah, Rozier, Bane,
Hero's fun. Hero, Rozier, Turner. I'm good with all of them.
Hero, Rozier, Turner. Let's do Hero. Let's just do it.
Like, so to put in perspective, this will be our only one that we do, so we can get into baseball with our boy. Miles Turner, 45.5 ceiling. Go all the way. He's 25th. Hero, who's 32nd, only has a 43.9. It's literally like a 1.4 point get difference. So like, mix those dudes up. Like, don't just be a slave to it. You can. Don't get me wrong. You definitely can. It's very valuable to just get exposure to the dudes, and if they're the ones that you need on the slate, they're the ones that put up the highest score, and you're overweight to them, your portfolio is going to be looking good. So it's really just risk management and how you want to play it.
Yeah, I mean, for the person who's never ever got Fred VanVleet right in their entire life, there is something to him as a Q tag 6th rounder as well, and kind of betting against Scotty Barnes's ADP that's being thrust up there. I do like that.
Fred is right in that conversation. He has a higher ceiling by 0.4 points than Tyler Hero. So
There you go.
take it for what you're worth. The guys it's interchangeable. You can sell me a lot of them. Just don't scroll down to the 60th range and get dudes in the 30 ceiling. That big of a difference. So
yeah, 20 minutes left for this to lock, and it's only 76%. Start jamming those on your phone right now. Get in there. Those it's going to be close. It's going to be close. Get a little bit of value there, and don't be afraid to eat some of those Q tags and then get unique with it after.
Yes, sir.
All right, Chris is back.
Let's do it.
Yeah, this show was going to start and be almost all baseball, just because it felt like a good day with the BR not being there and BR closing tomorrow. We can do review of BR tomorrow and talk maybe some playoff gauntlet returns and stuff going forward. So it felt like a really nice day to mix in baseball. Also because Chris has been talking with Tuma, friend of the show, who was on the other day, and has access to some very top secret back end dinger data from last year. So very exclusive. Only place you're going to be able to find it is here as of right now. Yeah, Chris, what have we been working through? What have you been looking through?
Well, actually, unfortunately, it is now fully public.
Oh.
Yeah, Tuma dropped it like I think right at noonish. So right after we came on, but nobody else has graphs right now and some vizzes. So that's the good stuff. We got a little bit of a head start. Big shout out to him for getting this kind of right there. 11 hours ago. So it must have went live this morning. Big shout out to him, for setting this up, and Underdog just in general kind of being willing to share this kind of stuff, because it's super cool and it adds like a layer of strategy and analysis that you kind of can't get in any other format, really. And yeah, John just threw that in the YouTube chat there. So if you want to download that, it's a giant Excel spreadsheet. It is every pick from the dinger last year, 120,000 lines of Excel stuff. And it's got all the picks for the regular season, playoffs, finals, points, names, everything that you could ever want, really. So what we are trying to do and have done a little bit so far over the weekend is taking all of this data and turning it into some macro kind of big picture stuff, like the questions that you'd ask first if you were getting started in the contest or want to know what happened last year. The big caveat off the top is that all of this stuff is much more descriptive than it is predictive, because this is specifically, tailored to last year's contest, with last year's ADPs, last year's field, with last year's kind of just overall environment. So there was actually a good thread the other day with Herzig and Liam, where they were talking about beliefs and data and what the kind of the value of this historical stat analysis stuff was. And one of the things that Herzig said was, beliefs plus data is greater than just belief. And I think that's kind of the main takeaway here, is that this is by no means the be all end all of like analysis, and it shouldn't guide your entire strategy going forward. All we want to do, the only thing we want to do, is get a little more directionally correct than we were last year, and a little more directionally correct than the field. Because I think
love that.
There is really a giant edge here still, in terms of nobody's really gotten too deep into this. We only have one full year of data. 2 years ago, we just had it was a different game pretty much. And we went through it last year and we saw the whole thing, and people have started to adjust this year for sure. Like, I think the main thing you guys hit on with Tuma was outfielders and like the scarcity of outfielders and stuff. And I think I'm going to do this at some point, comparing just like outfielder ADPs like year over year. Like, what was the outfielder 12 last year compared to this year, that kind of thing. And I think we're going to see that like every top tier, mid tier outfielder has been pushed up the board, because people realize how thin the position is. So that would be something where you can't just look at 2022 and apply it directly to 2023, because you need to have consideration for like what the overall kind of player atmosphere has changed. So if you can take this and marry it with what do you think is going to happen, then you could be setting yourself up for some success here.
Yeah, I love that. So biggest takeaway obviously there from that sentence or that whole little blurb and stuff is just for me would be like, the one thing you said about Herzig's quote were like belief plus data. It's like, this is beautiful to have access to this. We're going to deep dive it. We're going to go through this, but we also just have to recognize that this is one contest, and this contest was marred last year by a potential lockout. The contest wasn't as big as we thought it was going to be. It might have changed certain things with pitching ramping up slower comparative to hitting and vice versa. There's so many things and so many different narratives that can muddy this data, but working with data is exponentially better than not, right? So let's go ahead, do a deep dive into this, and then we'll kind of see what our biggest takeaways are. So being the true spreadsheet virgin that Chris is, he couldn't just come on the show and talk through this. He made us a slideshow presentation with charts and analysis. It's incredible. So the first one we talk about here is roster constructions, right? And can you explain to everyone? Actually, at one point, I will post this if it's cool with you. I didn't add it to the comments and stuff today because I wasn't sure if you just wanted this or if you're going to publish it or what your plans are with the data. But yeah, let's just go through it and talk it through, right? So you have this nice little acronym AROE, advance rate over expectation. How do we go about calculating this? How did we come up with this?
So kind of the two main things I think that we were most interested in from talking to people beforehand was what will help you advance, so get out of your first pod out of the regular season, and then what will help you get to the final. So those were kind of the two benchmarks that I had considered in terms of like analyzing the different structures, the different positions, the different numbers of players at each. And so advance rate over expectation is essentially all the pods here in the first round where 3 teams advance out of a pod of 12. So if you played 100 teams and you just were the most generic, basic, average person playing the like complete baseline strategy, you would expect over those 100 entries to get through 3 out of every 12 because just, variance and whatnot. 25% of your teams should make it through to the next round. Okay. So that is our expectation, 25%. The advance rate over or under expectation would just be what was actually observed minus that 25%. And we do that just so that you have kind of a like positive is more, negative is less, as opposed to having to like always have in the back of your mind that, 25% is the anchor point and going up or down.
Okay. So then looking at this chart, we're seeing, so the first thing that jumps out to me is that the 866 is the most heavily utilized build, but comparative to football, it is not as crazy utilized as we give it credit already, right? Like only 26% of all rosters in the Dinger were 866s. First things first, do you think that was correct, Chris?
I think it was correct-ish. I think it was
directionally accurate.
Directionally accurate-ish. I think that in general, fewer than 8 pitchers is the right way to go. And I think here 866 being the kind of default meta like roster build last year was okay. I think we could do better by doing 767 or 776, and I'll get into these a lot more as we go down the board here. But the thing that jumped out here to me was actually I was surprised how few 8 pitcher and 9 pitcher and more teams there were. I thought there were going to be a lot more. And the field was actually a little bit ahead of where I expected in terms of the 6 and 7 pitcher builds. And we're going to see, spoiler alert, that they did quite well in most scenarios here. And I think this year, talking to people already and checking out ADPs and stuff, I think the bars here are starting to shift a little bit towards the left, where more people are embracing. Like I would be willing to wager that when we look at this next year at this time, the 7 pitcher kind of category is the most popular.
I would fully agree because I've noticed it in myself already too. Yeah.
And we can kind of see that with the AROE curve here, that the like those middle kind of sections there with the 7 and 8 are like a little bit above what you'd expect, and that makes sense just based on kind of the amount of teams that were built, the way teams were built. The 9 and more pitcher teams did quite poorly compared to what you'd expect, And we're going to see later on as well that all of these things are correlated and connected. So if you have more pitchers, you're going to have less infielders and outfielders. So in general, when we see some of these future graphs going down, like you have to kind of take them all with a grain of salt, because one goes up, one goes down. They kind of mean the same thing, just in a bunch of different ways. And the last point I'd make about these two here, that actually applies to both, is that the spike with the like the 5 pitcher teams, like both of those two kind of buckets, the 5 pitcher one and for the advance rate and the final rate, were significantly above expectation, which was kind of wild.
Okay, let me give you a narrative associated with that.
Yep.
Could we do the 5 pitcher build was only built by sickos who were the upper echelon of outlying best ball drafting talent, and it was such a small sample that number we can just throw out the window? Not throw it out, but comparatively?
Yes, massive grain of salt, I think. I looked up the actual numbers, and it was like 59 teams were 587 teams out of 4,500. So that is like a teeny tiny amount. 19 made the playoffs and 2 made the finals. So that automatically just boosts you.
And when we're dealing with such a small number, like if 59 of those teams were like that, what are the chances of those 59, 25 of them were built by the same player, and thus they gravitated to the same infielders and the same outfielders over and over again. They gravitated to the same pitchers, and they effectively built some variation or iteration of the exact same team over and over again. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, that data doesn't necessarily mean anything about the build. It just means something about that one player's potential choices of last season, right?
Absolutely. And one of the pieces of data that we don't have is like user by user kind of pick. So you wouldn't be able to kind of normalize for, like, if someone was just way overweight, like a hyper fragile build like that, you wouldn't be able to kind of normalize that for the stats. You just have the picks.
I think that's where like the future of this game is going, with like HUDs and overlays and stuff like that, where some of the best data that we can have will be peer-to-peer data, and it'll be like player versus player stuff like we had with poker, where it will tell me the frequency in which Numi selects a player in this round, a frequency in which you select such and such an outfielder at this price. And then I reverse engineer strategy, not based on this information, but based on other players' tendencies in the draft room. But that's some fucking down the line, way too sick stuff. Like that's
some real wizardry. Yeah.
Yeah. But hey, range of outcomes, right? Oh yes.
Let's be real, John. That's stuff that you've already thought about, and you're already continuing to think about late at night as you're up at 4 a.m. commenting on people's things. John's only thought is, how can we get to that point? And then he's like, wait, we don't want to get to that point. We don't want to, but it will come to that point. And then that's John's mental battle over and over again.
Just playing mental tennis, like in a deep sweat and like rolling back and forth, shivering late at night.
Yeah.
Dark Sheep doing the Lord's work here by simplifying. When we talk about builds in baseball, and the way we talk about them comparative to football is like, you go pitcher, infielder, outfielder. So that 8-6-6 is in that order, just like football would be the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. You talk about the number. That's how you do it for this. Yes, thank you for that. Okay, Chris, sorry. We're bouncing all over. I don't know if we're going to be able to get through all these slides here. Holy smokes!
No, we don't need to. But
well, let's see. Tell me where we want to jump and stuff.
Let's hit on this one for a little bit, and then we can move on to the pitcher specific stuff. This one is kind of a little more of a smooth curve for the final rate expectation. In terms of, there is kind of like, if you were to draw a trend line, it would be fewer pitcher, higher percentage, more pitcher, lower percentage, pretty much.
Okay.
Yep. The thing I will point out about the FROE rates is that if you were to do 100 drafts, your actual percentage time that you'd make a lineup through to the final was 0.69%.
Nice.
Just nice. Multiplying out the pod sizes. So if you see the minus 0.7% there for the FROE, that means they didn't make any teams through. That's kind of your like minimum boundary, the same way that 25 would be for advanced rates.
Okay, so two big takeaway numbers there. When we're looking at advance rate and advance rate over expectation, 25% of teams to advance, and then final rates over expectation baseline 0.69, correct?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
And anything that's final rate related here, more salts than you can imagine. Like there were 47 teams that made the final last year out of 4,500. So you're thinking about like the tiniest sample. The schedule has changed this year for the rounds. So they've shifted some things around in September. So that's going to maybe change things a little bit. So you just need to kind of keep that all in consideration when thinking about it.
Yeah, and one other thing I'm going to add is I think the contest is going to be significantly bigger this year too, because last year was marred by all of the uncertainty of whether baseball was either going to play or not, right? Because of the pending lockout. And I think even guys like me were low-key apprehensive and only got like 70-ish entries in some of these contests just because of that. I think this year, with how big Underdog has become, and like, honestly, I'll keep harping on this. There is no better way to play fantasy baseball, because everybody's scared off of fantasy baseball because they got to, what's going on with the bullpen? Let's do everyday adjustments. Let's do, constantly playing the waiver wire and shit like this. There is no better way to just sit back and enjoy fantasy baseball than playing these and then occasionally playing a day or two of battle royales when you have the time to do so. It is a very enjoyable way to play fantasy baseball and a way less intensive, overbearing fucking way.
Can I just say one thing to the NBA slate? Giannis was just ruled out.
Giannis was ruled out? He didn't have a Q. He didn't have anything.
So get ready for a fun day of hoops. Continue.
Absolute hoops, baby. Well, that we'll say that thrusts up Bobby Portis, obviously, even though the last time out he fell flat on his fucking face. But he was third in the NBA in double doubles this year. Bobby Portis is a fun play, and then Drew Holiday becomes a second, third rounder, but there's not much time to take advantage of that knowledge. So I would just jam some drafts and thrust those two players up in your ranks right now.
Yep.
Okay, sorry, we got a little derailed there. Anything else on final rate expectation that you want to add there, Chris?
No, nothing from this. These were the top 9 most common structures in general, and I think it was like 87 or 88% of the field used one of these 9, and then everything, the last remaining 11 were spread out over like whatever's left here, just random kind of one-offs and two-offs of different mixes, a couple weird ones, but these were the most common, and I think these are the ones that come up the most. If you want to flip to the next one about pitchers, this is kind of a more general version of the structures, and I think this is the one that we probably talk about the most and have the most discussion around, is how many pitchers do you want to take on your team? And I think this one did a really good job of summarizing the different buckets and the different advantages and disadvantages of each. I think the advance rate curve here, where it's pretty, it's bell curve-ish, like there's a peaks in the middle with the 7 and 8 pitchers. It's where the majority of teams are. That would be, I think, the safest kind of place to park yourself. Gives you good balance. You can pick up points every week from your pitchers and your infielders and your outfielders. Sticking on one of the extremes is a little bit more not as advance rate beneficial. And then if you go to the fewer end, it ended up being a kind of a long tail scenario where you ended up with fewer teams making it through to the next round, but they had an outsized kind of number of teams that advanced through the playoff rounds.
Interesting. Okay. So reading into that makes me want to gravitate a little bit more to some of the extremes, just in terms of like knowing that those teams could perform in an outlier I don't know. I don't know, because I the more we're looking at this stuff, the more my brain is equating it to football and going like, I think the future of football is like some insane, damn near close to optimal that we haven't even come close to yet. That is like 2, 3, 11, 3 or whatever, right? I don't even know if that adds up. But like that's like what my mind gravitates to. And I think treating the pitcher position kind of like the onesies positions in football makes a lot of sense. The onesies, of course, being the tight end and the quarterback, treating pitcher in that regard, where it's like, if we go and thrust up these elite ones and we get 5 of these elite ones and then just shut it down, does that give us a better chance than like dispersing all of our premium capital on the running back position versus, right? So that's where my mind's going with this. Do you think similarly?
Yeah, I really do. I think that we're going to get to kind of the ADPs and kind of what the drop-offs are at every position a little bit later on. But one of the things that we see in just regular everyday baseball and translates over to fantasy is there's a volume cliff now at pitcher, where you're either a good pitcher or a bad pitcher, and you're either going to get volume or you're not. And last year, like right around round 8, 9, 10, there was like a significant drop off in kind of the quality and the volume of pitcher that were available. The volume being, are you a pitcher that your team is going to let throw innings and is going to let throw at the beginning of the year, in the middle of the year, at the end of the year? Because those are the guys that actually make like a significant difference on your team. And like you said, John, that when we get down to like playoff 2-week rounds, you only need to start 3 of these guys. So if you get, your 6 pitcher team through, and 4 of those guys you took in the first 8 picks, let's say, you got shots at 2 start weeks from some good pitchers, and haven't actually gone back and counted up the points from pitchers in that week, but I would heavily bet that good pitcher 2 start weeks were by far like the highest advancing, which is common sense. And I feel like last year we spent a lot of time trying to deal with the pitcher position as a quantity problem instead of a quality problem. Like we tried to address it by adding more pitchers, which in effect was taking away spots from other positions that score a lot more.
Good point. Yeah, I really like that. And I think that has kind of been my biggest offseason takeaway as well, and why I've been gravitating towards this back end. And now is a great time to draft, because pitching is so suppressed from a price tag standpoint, is thrusting up some of those middle tier guys. Because what happened with baseball on just like a macro trend level, with like the evolution of bullpens becoming so good, with the evolution of the opener, with the evolution of, premium middling relief talent, where starters don't go 7, 8, 9 innings anymore. Starters only go 5, and then you have a reliancy on bullpen usage, is we've seen a lot of players who are probably physically capable of throwing 200 plus innings in a season, but because they are not the ace of their staff, they are not one of the top 3 front end starters on their staff, they do not allow them to do so, because the arms coming out of the pen are so much more talented, and they're rested from their front end starters actually going that workload. So now all of a sudden we have this situation where everyone who's pitching in that middle tier, the benchmark used to be 180 innings pitched from like your 3rd starter. That's dissipated now. That's gone. That's a figment of the imagination. And now staffs are put together with like 7, 8 starters over the course of the season, with 5 of them throwing 120 or 130. And you piece together a rotation that is not just the 5 that you see on the sheet of paper. It's actually 8, 9, 10 deep. And we see this from the Dodgers every single year, where they have such elite starting pitching, but there was only 1, maybe 2 front end horses to those rotations who could put up 200 innings. So what Chris is exemplifying with this data, what he's saying is, if we apply that to fantasy baseball, and we chase those premium 200 plus inning guys, and we put 5 of them on the same team, that's so much more, or 6 of them on the same team, that's so much more valuable than trying to piece together some back end arms of 9 pitchers who are going to throw 130, right?
That's been my favorite strat. Honestly, I've been talking about it with Chris, and I'm just going to, in this contest specifically, because I just think that with the way that's being built, I've just been doing so many 5 pitcher. I've just been I know adding on the 6, but I mean, when Chris told me, I think the fewer pitchers optimal. We still don't know that, but I think my hunch is that I'm just like, yeah, well, I'm just gonna build out these 5 pitcher teams. Take pitchers early while still getting an anchor infield, outfield, and then just having all the bats on the end, and then not needing to clog up your pitching. If you take your 4 or 5 aces early, stop. Take 5. Take the 6. Take the 6 max. Don't even think about going 7. It's literally putting a condom on that build. It's not going to help you. Like if those pitchers are what you're going to be to need to win, you need to then fill that other spot with a bat that can help you. More quantity in those. So yeah, I like right now going just 5 pitcher. It's been a fun. It's kind of, I feel like that's zigging while other people are zagging, because it's like, oh, we did 8. I think 7 is optimal. Let's do it 7. Well, we don't know anything, as you were just telling us. We have to take everything with a grain of salt. So yeah, getting as many. My shot is to get as many of those 5s pushed through, and then I think that's just leverage and itself with the build. So yeah.
Chris, anything else to add, or can we keep on scrolling here?
Yeah, let's keep going. The infielder one is kind of I think infield is the most kind of like plain like the easiest position to read. Infield in my kind of comparison is the wide receiver of MLB, because there's always infielders available. No matter what round you're in, they're always there, and they always score more than pretty much everyone else, except right at the top, and a little bit right at the end. But like rounds 3 through 18 or whatever, we're gonna look at the ADP thing in a minute here. There's just so much green like at the top, because you get five of them play every day in a major league lineup versus only 3 outfielders. And there's usually like an extra guy that's an infielder, but kind of gets a lot of ABs. Like you just have so many more actual capable major league players that play the infield spot, and you are starting the same number. An Underdog, you only have to play 3 of them. Same thing with the outfielders. And the addition last year of a flex position really helped that too, because now you can jam in 4 infielders that are getting regular ABs, and there's just so much volume out there that I think infield you can kind of just, when you need one, you take one, and there's always more later.
Yeah, I love the wide receiver comp for infield, because there's just more of them on the field. There's more opportunity share to go around, and you don't necessarily need to hit on like the absolute premium one. You can have the Tyquan Thornton of our contest push you through at some point, i.e. the Andrew Vaughn, right? Like that could be the guy you need in week 16 of whatever. Like, you know what I'm trying to say. The analogy is.
I think to that point of just like the way I'm with my slow drafts when they're completed, I'm all past 17. I will have 100 bullpens done. And right now it's like every slow draft, when I get to round 15, it's like, oh look, I have 5-6 pitchers, a bunch of outfielders. There's 2 infielders on my team, maybe 3. And it's like, oh, look what's available. Infield, everyday hitters, starters. It's like, well, this is fun. I'll just take you. Right now, my problem is taking Wilson Contreras over and over again, and Alejandro Kirk and all these boys. But like, it's just to that point. Like you have a plethora of guys playing every day that are going to get the at-bats, that are going to be some of them in the top of the order. It's like, it just seems so silly. And it's just the easiest way for me to go about drafts right now. So I like that.
Yeah, I like that. And then that leads us to the outfielder, which effectively we're doing the same thing as running back, where we are seeking those premium projectable volume and outlier, as Pat Corrine says, legendary seasons from that position at the top of the draft board. Then we thrust that next tier up to run parallel to it. And then we fall into a quote unquote dead zone where everyone else is thrust up in the, I don't know what we could paint that, but let's just throw out some numbers for fun. Round 8 through 11, we could call the outfielder dead zone, the running back dead zone equivalent, where we're thrusting up pieces that aren't as talented as the pitching and as the infield players going around them because of the scarcity or perceived scarcity of the position. Do we all agree there?
Yeah, totally. And this kind of like perfect curve here for the advance rates kind of illustrates that. You don't, there's not really too much to do at outfield besides get some elite ones and then take a couple more, because outfield gets pretty thin. And just at the major league level, there's a lot of outfielders that are shitty hitters and they play because they're good defenders, and teams need to fill gaps. So you need to, you need bats here.
That's Sorry, I think that's a really good point that I want to harp on, where it's very different from football, and our game's very different, is the defensive side of the ball, right? Because there are so many players that are good baseball players who don't factor into fantasy in any fucking regard, and they're everyday players, right? That doesn't happen in football because, like, we're not drafting O-linemen, right? We're not drafting, like, stuff like that where it's like they don't show up in the box score, but they're really, really good. Like, that sort of doesn't equate. So I think that's a really good point to bring up.
Yeah, and to be honest, like it goes hand in hand with having 4 infielders. Like you're gonna want teams are gonna prioritize that defense in the outfield, even if you can't hit. Like there's more of those guys. Whereas in the infield, it's like, oh, that guy can't really do anything. Stick him at the corner. You know what I mean? Like stick him at first. Like, oh yeah, he can play. You know what I mean? Like those positions don't require the athleticism and the skill of some of these outfielders do. So it's like they're literally in there to hit. Versus these outfielders where they're in there to play defense. So yeah, that's a good point, Chris. I like that a lot.
Yeah, did I mute myself? Are we good? Can you hear me?
No, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Numi. It's like where from a macro level, if you don't just like understand the game of baseball, and where we can apply like real life knowledge to these contests, is if you cannot play defense, you play corner infield. Like you play DH and you'll probably be listed as an infielder on the site, or you will play first base and split your time there and be listed as an infielder on the site, right? Mm-hmm. That's why there's so much offensive value at infield comparative to outfield. Anything else to add there, Chris?
No, not really. Just make sure that when you're like drafting, you are aware of this and you're leaving like the first couple rounds with a couple of outfielders. I think that's kind of been the meta strategy so far this year, and I have no reason to disagree with that.
And one thing I just want to touch on, if anyone is coming from a roto background, hasn't really played this, just one thing I want to touch on is like you got to kind of throw that out of the window. If you're listening to other things, because positional scarcity versus every other draft and Underdog is totally different. Like he said, how the 4 infielders are clumped into an infield position, like versus if you look at drafts, you can see second baseman is a wasteland. Like you need to reach to get a second baseman. Otherwise you're just waiting. Like here, it does not matter. It does not matter about any of that stuff. So that's one thing to worry about. Like it's just pitcher, infield, outfield. If you're listening to other content and they're talking about, wow, this guy's thrusted up more or worth more than that and not in a total points category, it may not be a 1-for-1 porting that over, because it's just the formats are so different. And a lot of the talk is roto heavy and these season long managed. We're slowly starting to get more. But this is one.
And that I want to point out there. That roto stuff is like people chasing categories, whereas here we're chasing fantasy points, which is completely different. We don't have to look for a benchmark of specific steals, or keep in mind that we need a benchmark of average to hit, like that sort of stuff, right? Like we are looking for raw scoring points. And if you have a bad week, guess what? You're not going to score on our platform because someone else on your roster is going to score over them, which is completely different in roto style baseball, where if you have someone who goes through these hot and cold streaks, like a Joey Gallo, like something of that magnitude, he is going to negatively impact your lineups. That's not going to happen here. Nobody's going to negatively impact your lineups because they're just going to be on your bench. So I think there's some big macro takeaways from that conversation that we're pulling from real baseball and pulling from this data, right?
Yeah. And it kind of went with Tuma when he pointed last week is one thing with not being able to swap players at the beginning of the season, where if someone's bad, you can drop them. If someone's good, you can pick them up. Like the back end of drafts can actually become very, very important. Whereas if you're just grabbing guys that like are fringe worthy, can get up there, but like if they are bad at any spot, like they can be sent down and they're worthless versus guys that are going to be consistently up there, like their job is secure unless they just fall off the face of the earth. Those are things to consider too, because it's best ball. We can't pick up people. We're stuck with our rosters. So,
and I think that's a sick segue into this chart.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first most important thing to think about with this chart is the distinction between points added and points scored. Points scored would be we just download the, final stats from the year and we just calculate every single player gets one number. Like last year, Aaron Judge had like 1,900 and something ridiculous points, and that would be his points scored. Points added is a little bit more nuanced because it's going to be different for every pick on every team. Because what points added is, it's Underdog's, it's the data that they provide us, and it would be for your share of Aaron Judge. The points added would be the number of points he scored in a lineup that counted for a week. And so any week that he didn't make it into your lineup because there were 3 other outfielders that were better than him, or he was hurt, got rest days, that's a 0. So every pick is going to have a different points added score. And what this really helps us do is see where points are actually coming from, not just who scores the most points. And the first 2 things here that jump out are infield, again, everywhere, like just higher. Like there's that peak around the Goldschmidt zone, and then later on just around that glut, like around 150-ish, where you really just couldn't go wrong taking an infielder. And there was just projectable volume and value everywhere. And then the other one that catches my eye first is the Matt Brash zone right around pick 200, where you have this horrible stretch of pitchers that we were pushing up in efforts to combat the pitcher problem by quantity instead of quality. And we probably took too many chances on low volume, high efficiency guys, or guys with lower chances to actual volume than we expected. And this graph really illustrates that, yes, these guys were only adding 200, 250 points when you could have taken outfielder X for 500, or in that same range earlier on in drafts, you could have taken a shot on Julio, who won a lot of people a lot of money last year. One of the kind of flip sides of taking these late pitchers was you were costing yourself the opportunity to take some of these game-changing hitters that popped up late, like Julio, like Brandon Nimmo, like Jeff McNeil, like these guys that were just around late, popped for various reasons. But if you took, even Alex Cobb was a great late round pick last year, kind of turned it on around the end, had a couple of impact playoff weeks, probably still would have rather had Julio at the end, or O'Neal Cruz. We talked a lot about O'Neal Cruz.
The irony in saying that is Julio didn't even play the last 2 weeks of the season.
Yeah.
And you still would have rather have him. Right. And now, I mean, Julio might be one of the greatest outliers in recent memory of baseball history. Right. He could be just this absurd talent, and he wasn't supposed to make the opening day roster. Then he did, blah, blah, blah. You could paint the reverse narrative of Julio with Joe Adell, who made the opening day roster, who's a highly touted prospect, who then was hey, we're going to get every day at bats for Odell in a lineup with Ohtani and Trout and blah, blah, blah. You can go down the actual specifics of these narratives. But when we look at these macro level trends of points added, I think it just kind of affirms our not necessarily biases, but affirms what we've been saying earlier, that we're not as smart as we think we are at picking back end starters. We are not as smart as we think we are at being able to pinpoint the person whose stuff metric and is going to align with innings, which aligns with volume. We are not very good at that. So why are we doing that comparatively to locking in some of these secure points at the back end of drafts and spending our mid-tier capital on more projectable innings or potential outlying innings, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this really does show as well the flatness of the top of pitching. Whereas like your elite guys really don't score a ton more than the next tier, who don't score a ton more than the tier after that. But right around pick 100, it just falls off a cliff. Like that's where you go from like, I'm the guy getting the ball every 5 days and my team is counting on me to, go out there and throw 6 innings, grab a quality start, whatever, to a guy that gets skipped because you need a week off for rest, or a guy that, has to be managed later in the season because you're on an innings limit or bad matchup. So you don't kind of get run out there every week. And I think we focused a lot on kind of how flat it was as opposed to how deep it goes.
That's a good point, because another way to illustrate that would be like, what's the difference in, now obviously we're never going to have this data, but what's the difference in pitcher ADP 193 and pitcher ADP 450? Like overall ADP. But then if you did that with infield outfielder, we could see a drastic difference. But we probably, like, if we took this chart on the right hand side and expanded it out further and further, the green and the orange would stay above, and then somewhere around 400, 500, 600, the green and orange dips below because you go to bench players, and then the purple stays like slightly above, and that's where the difference would be. So if these drafts were like 40 rounds long, there's a lot of merit in taking late round pitchers, but only being 20 rounds, like, we're not as good at projecting who pitcher overall scorer number 200 versus overall score 450, because that's how deep baseball runs.
Yeah, totally. That's actually a really great segue to something that's a little bit lower down the list. But if you scroll all the way down to like 27 or 28,
there's 27 slides. Let's go.
Oh, there's more. We got 30. Yeah.
Oh my
Graphs
God.
on graph. Here we go. So this
let me pause right before we go to this one. Half you guys watching have not hit the like button yet. There's 40 people here hanging out. There is nowhere else that you are going to get this data. There is nowhere else. So if you are playing anything Underdog related with the sickos, this is where you're getting the charts. And yes, the sultry natural tones of our man Chris down here. Yes, Nez could never. That's all we'll say. Do us a favor, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that follow. And if you're not doing so already, follow Chris on Twitter if you are going to be jamming in these Underdog baseball streets. Baseball, like the Spanish spelling with a 3 mixed in there. Okay, Chris, take it away.
That's the one. So what we want to look at here is just the difference in positions and projectability. So this would be, you are in your draft, and every infielder 1 would be the first infielder that you picked on your team, infielder 2, the second, third, all the way down. What this is showing is, are we actually good at picking players and picking them over one another? And what are the gaps between the different positions and the different roles? So the first thing that I'd want to point out here is, if you look on the right at the pitcher bars, they're all lower. Like if we put all these bars in a row, the pitcher ones would be like 9 of the bottom 15 or something. Like they just don't score as much. And then when you get down to the end, the difference between pitcher 6 and pitcher 9 on average, I think, whether that 35 points or 45 points, like that's very, very small for some of these gaps. And what that tells me is we are overconfident in our ability correctly picking pitcher 6 over pitcher 9. And once again, this was a quantity over quality problem last year, where
so much like quarterback. It's so insane.
Yeah, exactly. And the way that we dealt with it last year was, okay, I'm not great at picking pitcher 6 over pitcher 7 over pitcher 8 over pitcher 9. Let me just take all of them. But I think the way that you actually want to deal with it is saying, fuck pitcher 6 through pitcher 9. Give me a better pitcher 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'll deal with 6 if I need to.
Yeah. It runs so parallel to what everybody talked about in football this year about thrusting up those elite high-end quarterbacks, because the way they're not going to score as many raw points as, Christian McCaffrey or whomever from those first 3 rounds, but the projectable floor, the solid, like, hey, we'll take fewer of them and we'll build out the rest of the roster spots with volume, just makes so much sense, like, comparatively. And then to the same analogy where you're saying, hey, hey, we don't think we can project between here. Well, we can't really. Like, some people were on Danny Dimes as that back end guy. Some guys were on, I don't know, Marcus Mariota as a back end guy. That'll be our guy with a rushing floor. Like there's so much discrepancy. Nobody was on Geno Smith, right? Some people were drafting Drew Lock over Geno Smith. So to paint that same analogy, it's like if we can't even pick who the best 30th quarterback is, how are we going to pick the 75th best pitcher versus the 105th best pitcher, right? Like it.
Exactly. And just before we move off pitcher here, can you go down one more slide? Because the next thing that I wanted to look at here was, okay, that's just in general. That's across all teams with all pitchers included. The thing I wanted to see was what happens when we take all of the pitchers and we put them in buckets based on how many total pitchers you picked to see if, okay, so we're not great at picking between the last handful of pitchers on your team.
Yep.
Are we good at figuring out kind of the top end guys? And with, if you take 5 pitchers, you're probably expecting they're going to be better. They're also going to add more points to your team because there's less guys that they're kind of competing for spots with. But I think what this shows is the more pitchers you add, the flatter your bars get at the end. And the shorter your front end bars get, you get more points overall from your pitchers, but it gets tougher at the end to decide on, what on what pitcher you want and is actually going to benefit your team.
Yeah, I think this is a brilliant illustration of everything we were just talking about. Is just if you take these last 2 picks in like a 7 pitcher build, or if we go to a 9 pitcher build and we take these last 4 picks, like what are we effectively adding to our roster in terms of scorable added points? It's damn near negligible comparative to what we could be doing by adding another outfielder, another infielder, another whatever, right?
Yeah, totally. Can we flip back up one to those infield and outfield ones? Yeah. So you'll see here that the infield is, very stepped and very even because infield, there are more of them. They are more projectable. We had kind of more options. And at every point in the draft, you felt pretty good about taking an infielder. And I think this kind of confirms it too, that baseball projections in general, just as a comparison to football, are very good. Like there are people that have been doing this for a long time that are very good at their jobs, and like Cardi released his projections the other day. Everyone pops them in. We have new rankings. Like it consolidates it down to one number, and you go. Football, there are a million things that could be different. You're projecting roles, you're projecting breakouts, you're projecting all this other stuff. It's really kind of condensed into a
there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of subjective noise, or a lot more subjective noise in football projecting because there's a lot of IKB baked in, right? Of who's going to win a backfield, who's going to who's a better pure talent versus this. What do you think the coaching staff's going to do? Whereas like baseball, there's who's going to play third base every single day, and how you project that comparative to how other people projected. There's a lot more continuity, but then there's a lot more accuracy as well.
Exactly. Shout out to Sheep. We were talking about this morning, but just he was kind of saying the first couple rounds, he doesn't feel like there's too many like player stances that you can take because baseball is so projectable. And also Blake just put in the chat, very important point. Baseball is a 162 game season that they play every day. And you're going to have 600, 650, 700 plate appearances from your best guys. That's a long time to like realize that edge and realize like what projections are like. Whereas in football, it's like a 13, 14, 15 week sprint where every week is like it's insane basically.
Yeah, just like think about how much player value and perceived value of a certain commodity changes week over week with just one injury or one snap count change or one rotational pivot by a coaching staff. Like the most extreme shifts in which we will see in baseball will be positional players being traded, potentially new lineup spot or moving to a reserve role or something of that magnitude, or a breakout from a rookie who then thrusts himself into everyday playing time. Those are kind of like the two extreme outliers, but outside of that, there's nothing as crazy or as volatile as football.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we have a better idea in baseball of what is someone's like true talent and true skills and what skills. Like we have projection curve and aging curve and all this other stuff that's way over any of our heads to determine who these guys are and who they're going to be. And that really kind of helps you like fine tune the specific player projection. Where in football, there's just so much more additional noise you have to account for, which makes it tough.
Yes, well put. Yeah, anywhere else to jump here?
Not too much. I think we pointed out the infield and the pitcher ones. The outfield one is also pretty self-explanatory. There's a handful of very good outfielders. And then the bars kind of drop quick and it flattens out because, like we said, at the end, it's pretty thin.
Okay, yeah, I think these three charts are my favorite of the whole thing because it does visually illustrate basically what you're adding by adding X player to your roster construction, right? And I do really gravitate towards like, hey, look at what we're doing with 5, 6, 7 pitchers, and then look what we're doing with 8 and 9 because we don't know who to select or we don't think the value of selecting them means overly that much. I think that's a great takeaway there. Then to move to outfield, look at the outlying potential of first round outfielder comparative to all of them out, all the other ones. And then almost in the same facet as pitcher, it kind of flattens out a little bit because we don't really know who to select with these back end outfielders as breakout potentials. We're not as good as we think. So harping on early outfield, early pitching right now, and then filling out from, hey, look at if we go super deep with infield, we're adding more raw points comparatively to the other two positions. And guess what? We're fucking better at selecting them too. So this has been very illuminating for me to add some of this data to some of our thought process. And I don't want to use it necessarily as confirmation bias because we're smarter than that, right? Like we're going to use this as an additive tool, not as a crutch to define our drafting strategies. But for my money right now, this looks so beautiful to, hey, we're going early outfield for a reason, and we're thrusting up some of that projectable elite volume-based pitching next.
Yeah. It seems that's following the way that I've been drafting. The way, like,
okay, no one cares about your teams. We get it. You're smarter.
Not
than
about my
everybody.
team. I'm just saying that it's good. It's a good confirmation bias for me to see this. And then I mean, literally every draft is the same. It's different players, but like it's the same structure when you get to the 12th through whatever. It's just all right. Time to quantity infield it. You know what I mean? Like because there's a plethora of them that are gonna do just fine versus the people going 4 or 5 rounds above them. Like, it's just silly.
This has been invaluable so far, Chris. Is there anything else we want to talk about, harp on, whatever? I kind of was planning. I would love to dive into a draft right now, but I don't have 40 minutes to add for another draft here, and we're going to do plenty of that coming up. We got some irons in the fire for some serious baseball content coming forward, and Chris is going to be involved in a lot of that. Anyways, there's going to be opportunity for us to be drafting at length. So I kind of want to tie a bow on it all, but I'd be remiss if there were any other charts, if there was anything else. Can I share the information? Can I drop this in the chat, or are we saving it for an article?
Yeah, drop it in the chat. There will be an article that comes out. Tuma, the deal with I got the access to this stuff to help him put some things together for a piece that he's working on shortly. I think sometime this week, could be as early as tomorrow. I know he's really right now. He wrote a really good piece last week or 2 weeks ago on undervalued aces, and I think he's going to tie in a lot of the pitching stuff that we talk about. For in terms of the rest of the content here, the charts are in here. I'm going to start probably later today dropping some threads with my thoughts with some of the pictures and whatnot. But TBD on where any actual written stuff pops up besides Tuma's things. The last one that I would want to just briefly look at in here once we pin it, well done, would be right in the middle, slide 15. It's about late round pitchers once again, because I just need to hammer this over everyone's head one more time. It is number of pitchers drafted at the end of drafts. So we always talk about how many pitchers you want at the beginning of your draft.
Mhm.
And then when me and Tuma were talking, I was like, all right, well, let's just try and flip this around and see kind of what the numbers look like when we just look at teams that took pitchers at the end.
Okay.
And you get kind of a nice curve here in terms of percentage of teams that did different things. So it's kind of a nice spread of some teams took 2 more, and some took 1 and 3, a handful took 4, some 0 and 5. So it's a pretty like balanced range here of samples. And the 2 curves are pretty telling in terms of kind of what worked for people last year and what didn't. And what worked was avoiding this range entirely. Or if you needed one of these guys, taking 1, maybe 2. As soon as you got on the other side, if you took 3 of your last 5 picks for pitchers, you started basically losing EV on the field, and your rates went down a little bit. If you leaned even heavier and went 4 or 5, you basically got submarined by those guys that really weren't contributing to your teams. So this kind of tied that up nicely. But really, the thing about pitcher last year was it was way thinner at the end than we expected, and way thinner when it mattered, because the guys that matter pitch at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think that's a really sharp point. We've talked about the guys that matter at the end of the season. We've talked about rookies, how there's potential shutdown, there's whatever. And those are the targets in which you are drafting in these late round 16 through 20, those type of profile and architect. And those are the toughest to bet on. So if you're going to do the kind of invert the build and switch it up and hammer infield, outfield early, and then build pitcher late, it's not going to work out in your favor necessarily, according to this data, right? Like it's a very, very hard way to build. And we built one of those teams on stream to see what it would look like. And it's the equivalent of your wide receivers look great, but I'm a little worried about your running backs. It's the equivalent of that meme out into the universe. Yeah. Out into the universe with this, where it's like, yeah, that looks kind of great, but there's a huge fucking question mark associated with it. So, yeah, I mean, when we've used mixed analogies to describe football knowledge in this, and it's kind of imperfect, and we do this back and forth dance. But the way that I think about this and this chart right here would be me punting at quarterback and tight end, and then trying to be like, in the last 4 picks of the draft, be like, I'm going to pick the 2 perfect breakout quarterbacks and the 2 perfect breakout tight ends. Good fucking luck. And they might not exist, right? So that's another like caveat, is like that profile might not even exist on that season in that range. So I do think this is, I think this is very, very, very smart of you to look at this data in this regard, because it actually quantifies the fact that, like, hey, we do have to spend some premium capital on pitching.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. And just like off the top of your head, if you had to go back to last year's playoff round, who were the guys that you needed to advance and win? Just off the top of your head.
Like for the playoffs? Or
playoffs.
Bo Bichette, Aaron Judge.
There you go. 2 names, 2 hitters, 2 top of the line hitters.
Yeah.
Could you even tell me, like,
no,
I don't have any pitchers.
Yeah,
Shane McClanahan maybe.
Yeah.
McClanahan got hurt in the playoffs too, so he was out for a little bit. But like, just off the top of anyone's head, you needed those like elite hitters to kind of make it work. And we don't remember any of the pitching guys that spiked in the playoffs, because even their spikes were not nearly as big as, like, I think Schwarber scored like 190 points or something in the final week. And the highest pitcher was like 130. I think Snell had like 3 great starts. So there's just a gap, and we just need to kind of understand that and kind of figure out where to fit our pitchers to make it work.
Exactly. And I think to that, it's like, of course there's going to be a gap between hitter and pitcher, but it's like when I'm thinking about it, it's like the gap between the pitcher I'll take in the early round versus the uncertainty and just dramatic drop off of points there. It's like, if I can guarantee and get the top premium pitchers that are going to score, and then in the round that I'd normally take the bat or those pitchers that are just going to be wild cards, you're not going to know what they're going to be. They're probably not going to score. You can just go take hitters that will legitimately help you in those weeks. Like, it just seems like a no brainer to just, you don't have to just fully go on onslaught pitching, but get your 2, 3, possibly 4 very quickly, and then see how your builds go. So
if we want to put player names to some of this data that Chris has provided us with here, just to illustrate his point in terms of like advance rates, this is a chart that I keep coming back to that Tuma put out in one of the articles. This is a chart about the highest percentage of advance rate per player. Aaron Judge had the highest advance rate last year, 63%. That's basically having the legendary Christian McCaffrey season, and you had to have it effectively. But just to illustrate from this chart, to go with Chris's point, is there were only 3 starting pitchers who had an advance rate over 35%. And it was Framber Valdez, it was Chris Bassett, and it was Shane McClanahan, who were all in that like kind of round 11 through round 16, and then were the guys that popped, right? Like they had greater volume and greater outlying stuff than we thought at draft day, and then they thrust up in terms of expectation versus ADP, and there was nobody else on there that from the pitching category. So it just very, very interesting to talk about.
Exactly. They were the guys that were right on the edge of that volume cliff that ended up performing like guys at the front end of pitcher, as opposed to the guys that were drafted around them that ended up performing like shitty 18th round, 4th, 5th starter, like part-time guys, basically. So if you can pick those 3 guys perfectly, then you're just printing money. But otherwise, I feel like, focus your resources a little higher up in the draft.
Yeah, I like that. And then we don't necessarily need, if you focus your resources earlier in the draft, we don't necessarily need to hit on all 3, because what's harder to do? Hit on 1 from 3 picks or hit on all 3 with back end picks, right? So it becomes this kind of navigational thing. Yeah. What if Michael Kopech is the guy you need? That's a fun name that I've been thinking a lot about recently too. Yeah, Woodruff is one that stands out to me as one of the biggest ADP versus outlying talent there. Hi, Nez. And yes, missing you boys, but at least your replacement is smarter and more handsome. Yes, you never would have ever in your whole life done any of this prep work or these beautiful charts for us, Nez. I can definitely attest to that. So we are happy to have Chris here. Okay, one more additive. Tuma does have that data available for download now. So if you are as smart or think you're as smart as Chris and are a sicko and deep in the weeds and want to mess around with that and then share some of that for the Discord, share whatever, by all means, let's talk through some more of that. Start providing some of that. If you guys are not part of the Deposit Kingdom Discord, all of Chris's stuff is available on his Twitter, but it's also pinned in the baseball channel of the Deposit Kingdom Discord of our channel. There's a link below to subscribe and sign up to that. Gentlemen, any last stuff to add? Anything you got to get off your chest before we get out of here that has to be said today?
Negative.
No, we're good to go. Chris, appreciate you so much, man. This is invaluable data and presented so beautifully, stuff that I could never do. I'm going to keep doing a little deep dive on this. We'll have you back again very shortly. We're going to do a lot of baseball stuff coming up. We're probably going to end up doing some irons in the fire, but we might end up doing a couple times a week baseball content, and we'd love for you to join in some capacity there and keep talking through these sicko charts as the draft season emerges. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, no, love talking all this stuff up with you guys, and we haven't even talked about stacking yet. So
yeah,
we haven't. Hours worth of content that we'll get to.
We haven't talked about stacking. We haven't done the player takes stuff yet. So we're gonna have a lot of content coming your guys' way for baseball specifically. Once kind of football is a figment of our imagination, and these contests are gone. We're hell bent on converting a lot of people into baseball people this year, because it is a beautiful fucking game, and for my money, it's the best way to play fantasy baseball. And for my money, it's the most enjoyable game that Underdog offers on their platform. And we're going to grow this shit. Grow that game. Let's go. Numi, anything to add before we leave, my friend? Nope. All right. Yes, we will be doing mitten returns drafts potentially tomorrow. We will it feels like a really good day to do it tomorrow before like BR drops and stuff like that. I think mitten returns will be a big focus of tomorrow, but I'm holding out hope for a $2 million man at some point this week, and I was trying to do mitten returns with him. So we're going to end up doing it once, maybe twice. So what we will see based on how the old DMs break in our favor this week. We'll see. All right. Everybody's favorite time of the show, I guess. All right. Do us a favor, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that follow. Go follow Chris on Twitter at baseball. I love to say that like that. Just butcher it entirely. Good luck to everybody sweating in the BR tonight. Good luck on the MLK slate for hoops, and good luck to the single game contest tonight. There are so many fun Monday night builds available. Get in those contests. That's honest to God, don't be scared off by the 2 quarterback build. You're gonna get yours. It's a really fun slate to draft. If you're not playing Underdog Fantasy, use promo code badge, blah blah blah. Yeah, that good shit. All right, everybody's favorite time on the show. The end. Peace.